Mark, let's roll back the years.
Yeah.
What was life like for you as a child? Where did you grow up?
Yeah,
Let's paint a picture.
so I'm a South East London boy. I grew up in Plumstead. It's near Woolwich, London Borough of Greenwich. Uh, Born in 1980. So, what was life like? My story's a little bit typical stereo, like very stereotypes in the sense that you've heard it before. And that's my fear, that the reason why you've heard it before and you hear it now and you're probably going to hear it in 30 years' time is because of the issues that affect people and never change. Like they're never fixed, they're never combated. So single parent family, me, my two sisters, my mum, not a lot of money. Really grew up on an estate where it was a real us and them kind of attitude. It was more it was looked down upon to go to school, for example. Not through my mum. My mum would always take me to school, but if I had on my way to school, other parents would take the piss, kind of thing. It was like that. What you're doing, like no good for you and all that. So, multicultural family. Me and my sisters have different fathers. So my father's from Iran, my mum's English, Irish. My sister's dad's from Jamaica. So we grew up in a very multicultural family. Experienced high levels of racism. You think this is the 1980s. The BNP had their headquarters in Welling. The National Front was rife in the 1980s, early 90s, late 80s, early 90s. There was 4 or 5 major racist killings in the London Borough of Greenwich. Stephen Lawrence obviously being you want to say the most famous one, but the most well-known. I actually went to school with Stephen as well, so we'd cross paths. But Roland Adams, for example, was another one in Thamesmead. There was a few other guys that would come victim to that. So tensions were high. So I didn't really have a father figure. My dad left. I've never met him. My sister's dad left. So I hanged around with the older boys on the estate, and that's how I started to get into crime, because if they liked music or football, those rappers, maybe I would have done that. But I followed them guys, and I ended up, just getting into crime and doing that thing to survive. But you don't see nothing wrong in it, right? Because people are hungry, people have no money. No one. I've never met anyone that's gone to university, except for my sister was the only one, and she's younger than me, who had gone to university. There's like that real feeling of that you don't belong in them types of worlds. And I think as human beings, we play into stuff that we play the part of how we think we're expected to behave. That's just human nature. We behave the way that our environment expects us to behave.
And when was your first run-in with the law?
So, I would say 13. I think I was first arrested at 14, first went to prison at 15. I've done 10 prison sentences since, finishing off with an IPP sentence. I'm still on licence for that now. But you growing up in them types of environments, it's inevitable that you're going to bump into the police. Sometimes you could just be walking down the street and your face don't fit, or you could just, be doing something you're not supposed to do.
What opportunities were available for you around that age?
So, for me personally, at the time, I don't think there was any. But now looking back, there's some self-responsibility in there. That there are people that grow up in them environments and do really well for themselves. But there's other people that grow up in them environments who choose a different path. So let's go back a question. My first interaction with the police actually wasn't that I was doing anything when I was probably 8 or 9 years old. And my mum was walking around the shop with me and my 2 sisters. My younger sister was in the buggy, and the National Front was handing out leaflets and stuff like that. So that's what they used to do in the 80s. And was being nasty to my mum, and the police officer from Plumstead Police Station come round the corner and said to my mum, "That's what you get for having a kid with a nigger," and sent us on our way. So that was my first brush of interaction before that. My mum told me that before that, I wanted to be a police officer. I used to have the plastic hat, the you know, the plastic baton and the little whistle. She said after that incident, I went home and chucked it down the chute. So I believe that we're products of our experiences as children, and that then I truly believe was where my distrust in authority came from, and my me wanting to rebel, but I rebelled out of necessity rather than the want.
Can you describe what it was like going to prison at such a young age?
Yeah, I thought it was fine. My mates were older than me. A lot of them was in there. It was just like being outside. I went there, I smoked weed. That was it. In my first couple of sentences, there was no exercise and all that. That prison was like that. Went there, smoked weed all day long, and went and had a game of pool. Like there was, I wasn't scared. I didn't have fear of it. I didn't have fear of older lads and all that kind of stuff because all my friends was older. So I'd always been there. I'd never hanged around with people my own age. So I was used to them type of kind of environments and that kind of stuff. The only time prison really affected me was my last sentence because I was a father then, and I had more responsibilities and stuff like that. And then that ended up leading into me to kind of sorting my life out, if you want to call it that. But actually becoming more at peace with my past and stuff like that.
Did you see any corruption in prisons?
Most definitely. And for me, corruption isn't your stereotypical corruption. Everyone thinks corruption in prison is young girls who bring in phones, sleep with prisoners, and are bringing drugs and stuff like that. It's not like that. That happens. Obviously, that happens. But the majority of corruption I saw was from male officers, you know, bringing in. So now I hear that, you know, for tobacco, because you can't get tobacco in there, some of it goes for £1,000. So I think it's pretty easy pickings. But what I noticed was, for me, we have to define corruption. And if it's, for me, corruption is someone who doesn't do what they're supposed to, what they're paid to do, and treat people differently. So the officer that rips up the application form when someone's put an app in just because they don't like that person is a corrupt officer. The officer that turns a blind eye to their mates being over heavy-handed. The amount of kickings I saw officers give people or heard, you know, you'll never find statistics on assaults on inmates by officers, but there are loads of inmates on staff, and the problem we have is staff members have been sacked for that, right? So why do the POA and then people like that put their head in the water and say that it doesn't happen? I'm not saying all officers are like that. There's some really good officers. I come across some really good officers in my time who really want to help and really want to change it. HMP Grendon, I met a lot of good officers there who really wanted to help and really shaped and helped me change my way and change my visions and change my views on things. But I think it's easy to blame these young females staff for corruption and stuff like that, because then it takes the dairy off everyone else, doesn't it?
Can you talk more about your experience at HMP Grendon?
Yeah.
They have a bit of a different approach.
So HMP Grendon is a therapeutic prison. So when you go there, you take part in therapy 24 hours a day. So yes, you have your set groups, Monday to Friday, Tuesday to Thursday, you have groups. Monday and Friday is your wing meetings, community meetings. But even after that, so you can't play your music too loud. If you because it's night sanitation, i.e. there's no toilets in the cell. So if you come out and use the toilet and you're longer than the 8 minutes, and so you get challenged for your behaviour and all this type of stuff. So that kind of thing, that where it says therapy never sleeps, that's a saying. But yeah, but you're basically working on your offending behaviour to really understand what makes you tick, why I commit crime. And I really did that. It works really well for me. It doesn't work for everyone. It's the only kind of place like that in the country. Yes, there's therapy wings in other jails, but Grendon is the one that is 100% 100% all therapy in that kind of way. It has great results. And people say, why is every prison like that? But it's expensive. It's It's not for everyone, but it only holds 200 people. And there's 88,000 people or 84,000 people in the prison system. So to get through all them people, it would take millions of years.
Statistically, the rate of prisoners reoffending once they're released is really high. It's really damaging. What opportunities were available to you when you first came out of prison?
So on my last sentence, I've done well because I got a job. I applied for a job with the Prison Reform Trust where it was 4 people coming out of prison or on Rottle from prison. But beforehand, there wasn't many, to be fair. And it's, you know, I would like to say it is the stigma of having a criminal record and stuff like that, which clearly doesn't help. But I think the public really needs to understand that you're probably a lot safer with someone who's got a criminal record and a licence than you're not, because I know people that have run their companies and businesses and have explained that all the people they've had to sack for dishonesty and theft are the ones without the criminal conviction, because people who have criminal convictions know they're going to be blamed. You know, we need to really focus on helping people. The state needs to do more. When people get out of prison and they reoffend, that means the state has failed. And sending someone to prison is supposed to make their life better, plus protect the public, right? But if people are not rehabilitated when they go to prison, how's that protecting the public? In fact, prison is more damaging. It affects the mental health of people. It affects, you know, you send into people for 3 months, though that person might have had a house and a job. Now they're getting out of prison without no house because they ain't been able to keep up with their payments, without no job because they've got a criminal record. So how is that better off? Sending people to 3 or 6 months, it doesn't make no sense. You have people in prison that got a 2-year prison sentence and 20 years later they're still in prison under the IPP system. You know, that's inhumane. Germany stopped sending people back to this prison, to this country now, because they say our prison system is too inhumane. That's another European country. You know, the UN, I forgot her name, but the people that deal with torture under the UN have said the British prison system is torturous, especially the IPP sentence. You know, there's no coincidence when multiple people on the world stage is pointing the finger at our prison system and say it's shit and it doesn't work. Now, why is that? Overcrowding, not enough staff, don't pay staff enough, you know, cutbacks. You know, we've had 15 years, 16 years of a Conservative government. I've never known life to be so hard for people. It's the worst it's ever been. So, yes, Labour might have created some of these problems, but you've had 15 years to sort it out, and you actually made things a lot worse. So I personally think there needs to be a change of approach of how we view prisons. We should view prisons as a society issue rather than an individual issue. And I think that way we'll get some good results.
Can you talk more about your work with Prison Trust Reform?
Yeah, so when I first got out of prison, so I don't work there no more. But now I'm a CEO of my own company, a freelancing company called Fair Justice, and I do the same kind of work. But my work at the Prison Reform Trust when I first got there was all about fighting policy and changing policies within the prison system to make a fairer, more humane justice system, you know, and not a justice system just for certain people, a fair justice system for all. And I'll continue with my work there now. We've made some good strides and stuff like that. We like to be behind the scenes and attack policy levels and attack, when I say attack, like challenge policy at policy level and stuff like that, rather than on the ground in the news campaigning.
What policy do you think could be a real game changer?
IPP, resentencing or IPP. Massive. You can't have someone who's convicted to 2 years prison, IPP, and 20 years later they're still in prison. The fundamental cornerstone of our justice system is each punishment must fit the crime. Like, that doesn't do that. Also, you've got an overcrowding. You've got an overcrowding problem. So if you resentence IPPs, people could be released, and then you solve that. If you stop sending people to jail for non-violent crimes under 12 months, you again you relieve the pressure. 50% of females go to prison for under 12 months for non-violent crimes. These are mothers, you know. There needs to be something to do with that. You could probably cut the system by 5 to 10,000 just by putting in them implements. Yes, it is deemed that people are so dangerous now on IPPs they can't be released. But what world do we live in that the system has made them so dangerous? The system has made them worse. And I was IPP. I'm not dangerous. You know, in fact, I've sat on meetings with government ministers and stuff like that. So I'm not dangerous.
Mark, in the summer of 2019, there was this horrific terrorist attack on London Bridge.
Yeah.
That evening, Boris Johnson came out and he gave credit to members of the public who charged towards the terrorist and took him down.
Yeah.
What Boris failed to mention was some of these members of the public are actually ex-convicts.
Yeah.
Why on earth did you charge at a terrorist?
Because, so I was brought up in an era and in an area where you protect your friends at all costs. And I think that kind of mentality in them kind of situations stuck me. So because I saw my friends fighting with him, I felt that I had no choice but to get involved. So when we're from South London, that's what we do, and it's quite a criminal mentality. But no one would say it's a criminal mentality in that situation. Like, we saved lives; it was the right thing to do. He killed 2 of my friends, and he wanted to kill more and kill me. And so you fight for your life and you do what needs to be done. So that's kind of why I decided to get involved.
Did you have any fear?
Not really. I think adrenaline overtakes fear in that kind of sense. But I think again, if we look at Usman Khan, he was seriously let down by the system. Applied for over 100 jobs, refused them. Yeah, obviously he was a terrorist. He had previous terrorist things, so I understand that. Not saying he should have got an easy time or nothing like that. Couldn't really find anywhere to live. Couldn't earn no money. All these types of stuff. So everything that when he was brainwashed, everything would come back to him, wouldn't it? So Anjan Chowdhury, and that was his kind of person that he followed. Everything that he had said to him, these people don't like you, you'll never fit in here. All these kind of brainwashing techniques. Well, after you've been knocked back on your 100th job, 110 or 120, something ridiculous it was, they start to manifest back inside you, don't it? You can't do this, you can't do that, you're on tag. So it raises the question, what do we do with people when they're released of these types of offences? Because if we just leave them and suppress them and ostracise them, then there's going to be more London Bridge terror attacks. Now, that's not a popular view to have. Some people might say, lock them up and throw away the key, but we don't have that in this country. So that's not an option, and it's never going to be an option. But I do think more needs to be done. There needs to be a real look at it. Gone are the days where the government can come out and say they just want to attack our way of life. Bollocks. They used to say that in the 70s and 80s before social media. Actually, the government has part to blame in their foreign policies. I think, no one on that bridge that day agreed with countries getting bombed. No one agrees with that. Like, I can tell you now, no one agrees that I personally know in what's going on in Palestine at the moment. But the British government still go to back Israel. So what's that going to do? That's creating more enemies for ourselves. We have to really look at our foreign policies and think, why do people want to attack us? And it isn't because we go to nightclubs and we've got freedoms and all that. That's all bollocks. The guy that killed Lee Rigby in Woolwich, there's a video of him covered in blood. Listen to what he says. This is for the bombings in this country, for that country, the women and that. He's probably never been to them countries in his life, but what it does is it creates the propaganda for people to be brainwashed. We really have to address that. We really have to address with the prevent program doesn't work. So we have to really address with what do we do with people with this ideology, and what do we do with these people with this ideology when they've been released from prison.
Mark, you've got such a deep understanding of this topic. Do you feel like for policymakers listen to people like you?
I think they should. I think lived experience is lived experience of the criminal justice system definitely has its place in policy making, but just not speaking to them. They have their place as people that design, implement, and assess that policy. Now that's important because no policy is worth the paper it's written on unless it has the voices of the people that are going to be governed by that policy running through it. You know, how many times, and MPs and politicians still get caught out, how much is a loaf of bread? They know they get asked that question all the time. How much is a pint of milk and a loaf of bread? They're so out of touch. But they don't even do their bloody research before they go onto these programs. You know, so they're so out of touch. So we have to ask the question, why is that? So when people are addicted to substances, they have ex-users working with them and coming up with the programs and doing all that kind of stuff. Why can it not be the same for reoffending? Why can it not be the same for crime? Because I've never flew to the moon. So I can't tell an astronaut what it's like to fly to the moon. I can empathise with stuff. I can read about it and have an understanding. Don't know what that feels like inside. So why would I breach that subject without getting the input of someone that knows? And it's the same with the criminal justice system. There's a place for people with not lived experience of the criminal justice system and lived experience. Now, lived experience of the criminal justice system can be that you've worked within it. Doesn't always mean you've been to prison, but there definitely needs to have them voices running through it. Yeah, it's absolutely ridiculous that you wouldn't ask someone that didn't know nothing about a subject to write a policy about it. I just find it really strange, you know, that these things happen because it's just another kind of way of people wielding power over people and haven't got a clue.
Do you have any hope for a future, for change? Is there any signs that you see that things will change?
Yeah, I think getting people with lived experience more involved in the criminal justice system firstly is a big step, and I see that happening more and more within probation and all that kind of stuff. But you know, you need to bring people in at management level and all that as well. You can't just have people on the low wages and the lower run of the ladder. You know, there has to be a progression path. There has to be. Why does it take for someone like me to be a CEO of his own company, but to have to break away and set up my own company? Why can't I become that CEO for an already established company within that field? You know, we have to ask them questions. Why was it really difficult for me to even come to a senior management on the SMT in certain organisations? It's really difficult, right? So there needs to be the space for people to flourish and to you know, and earn it. I'm not saying just give it to people. Not tokenism. People need to earn it, but that can be earned quite easily. I also think that a change in government and a change on focus is helpful.
Lastly, Mark, you've had a pretty extraordinary experience. What would you say you've learned about the nature of humans, for good, for bad, for ugly?
Yeah. So I believe that if you give people agency and you give people a voice and you treat them humanely, they tend to behave in that way. And I think that when that doesn't happen, when people feel ostracised, when people feel like they're being treated inhumanely and they're voiceless, people rise up. And when people rise up, they behave in ways that they expect their environment to behave in. So for a lot of people, that's being rebellious and non-conformist and committing crime. People need to feel invested in their communities. If they don't feel invested, in the way that people feel invested in their communities, if they get a say how they live, I think that's absolutely massive. And that's what I see about human beings. Human beings don't need a lot to be made happy, you know, but respect and not feeling downtrodden and not being pushed into corners just because of the colour of their skin or what community they come from or what working class or class they are. You know, I believe that everyone should be treated equal, no matter what. And if you start off on that level playing field, then I think there's hope.
Mark, the experiences you've lived is extraordinary, and to come out the other side and not hold resentment in you, but to be compassionate and channel that energy in a really positive way. Our society has kind of moved forward so much in the last few decades, but the prison system is still a million miles away.
Yeah.
In terms of turning people into assets,
yeah,
rather than, really beating people down. So
yeah,
I want to thank you because the work
Cheers.
you're doing is amazing.
Thank you.
And you're a shining example of someone who's really turned their life around and become a real positive contributor to society.
Thanks very much.